the old adage of, God never wastes a moment. So you look back over the last 30 years and
Mm.
had no idea the experiences that were being created 25, 20, 30 years ago was going to turn into a book someday that would help people be intentional about a legacy.
So how do you turn your business into an actual brand? Well, my name is Bijal Patel, and I've had 13 years of corporate experience working at big Fortune 500 companies, and I'm taking all of that juicy firsthand experience and have brought it into my company Launch. Within this podcast, you're going to learn about branding, vision, identity, mindset, and how to scale your business to the next level. So let's go ahead and own your brand. Hey guys, welcome to Own Your Brand. I am so excited. I have a dear friend with me who is also amazingly brilliant, Lance Welch. And today we're going to talk about everything related to legacy brands. So that means your personal brand, your business brand, and even your family brand. So I want to welcome in Lance so he can give an introduction for himself about who he is and why you want to tune in.
What an introduction. Thank you. You look so happy too. All that energy, I can feel it through the screen.
I am happy, dude. I love you. You're awesome.
My name is Lance Welch, as she said. I guess as far as my introduction, I'm a dad of three incredible young men, 35, 32, and 30. I've been married to the same woman for 36 years, and she really is the glue that has held this whole thing together. And looking forward to the next 50 with her.
That is amazing. Allie is awesome. And if people don't know, you have a very, very amazing son, Peyton Welch. He's awesome. We love Peyton. And then there's this other guy, Taylor Welch. So like if you know who they are, they've been a part of my circuit too. So we're just like fam at this point in time. And you obviously have another son, Logan Welch, who I got to see at Peyton's wedding. But tell us a little bit about Lance, about what it is that you do. What are you doing right now in your life?
I am telling the story. I'm casting vision about what it means to have a family legacy and how do you get there. The whole premise of this particular book was everyone has a legacy. You're either going to have the default version or you're going to have an intentional version. So my message right now is how do I get more eyes and ears on this? Not because of just to sell a book. How do you create impact? And so this book is bare bones. It's like a blueprint on how do you do that on an intentional basis. And then my other time is split around coaching and developing people.
I love that. I love that. Show your book, by the way. So we haven't even introduced the book. So Lance wrote his first, is this your first book, right, Lance?
It is. Yep.
Yes. It's called The Legacy Navigator. It's a beautiful name, by the way. So like to impress a branding strategist, a world-class one at that with a name is a big feat. But what I love about The Legacy Navigator is that you were able to do something that a lot of books miss. And I love reading books. Thanks, all joking aside, thanks to your son, Taylor, reintroduced me to the world of reading in a time in my life 4 years ago where I probably read one book a year, literally. Oh, wow. And now I'm at the point where, and one book a year is probably being really gracious with myself. It might have been one every couple of years. And I was spending a lot more time Netflixing and chilling. And like a lot of the public does, like you Netflix chill, you hang out with friends, you have wine Wednesdays and so much social life. But my time reading wasn't where it needed to be. And so I've upped my reading game where now I read on average 3 to 5 books a week at a time. Like not a week, sorry, I'm not finishing them, but I'm actually like consuming 3 to 5 in a given week. I'm going through them. Yeah. What I loved about the Legacy Navigator is you were able to combine principles at a really high level of like, this always applies down straight to tactics at every single point, every single chapter. It was like, awesome. I'm so glad you understand the why and you can apply this principle, this model to your own family, to your own dynamic, no matter what it is. But here's what we're going to do moving forward. So talk a little bit about why was that important to you when you crafted this book?
Well, first of all, I had no interest in ever writing a book. So that's kind of the ironic thing is I had actually asked Taylor to provide some referrals to me for my coaching side of the business.
Mhm.
And typical Taylor fashion, just real direct. He's like, you just need to give me some content first. And I'm like, what kind of content? He's like, well, write a book or something. I'm like, I am not an author. He goes, well, I want to be able to say, I don't want to say just work with my dad. Here's what he has done. Do that. And so the premise of this was, I'm just going to write a sales book because I've been in sales since college days, which you can tell from the pick my age. That was a long time ago. But that's where I started. Couldn't get any traction on it. It was like, I know sales frontwards and backwards. I know the psychology of it. And it's, people don't want to be sold, but they want to buy something that's going to better their life. So, but I got no traction on that. So the next thing I switched to was I'm going to write on leadership because I love
Yeah.
leadership. John Maxwell is like the guru of leadership. I'm a coach in his organization. And I know everything rises and falls on leadership, whether it's corporate or in the household. Same thing though. I got no traction. I got to about 1,000 words and it was like I had to force myself to sit down and write, the old push pull
Mm.
strategy. I knew I had to get it done to create some content, but decided on, sit down. I'm a real advocate of thinking time. I have a
Mhm.
VIP meeting. All my clients, they have a VIP meeting each week that is just set aside to think. So I was asking, really the question is, what is my real passion? What lights me up? What will I talk for hours if someone will listen? And that was the topic on legacy. And once I landed on the topic, I still didn't have a title at that point. I was able to put down anywhere from 300 to 1,000 words a day, just like clockwork. So once I landed on the right topic, it was the right motivation. It was the pull strategy. It was literally compelling me to get ideas down on paper. And it's the old adage of, God never wastes a moment. So you look back over the last 30 years and
Mm.
had no idea the experiences that were being created 25, 20, 30 years ago was going to turn into a book someday that would help people be intentional about a legacy. And I think for me, the bottom line on a legacy is getting to this age where I am now. I truly value all the relationships, but especially the relationships with my adult sons. It is so cool that they actually enjoy spending time with their mom and dad. And that
Oh,
I'm learning is not a common practice here in the United States. It's
yeah.
just not there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much to unpack there. So like I love that. And this is where guys, you're getting like like 1/100th of what you're gonna get out of the book. But it's amazing. So let's start with that first. Is like I love the fact that Taylor had the insight to say, hey, you've got to give me a piece of content. And then it's so amazing to me that you can have someone in your life be like a catalyst to pull you and push you towards where
Yeah.
you need to go, but you're not ready to get there. And there's so many of us that are stuck in inertia, and someone comes and speaks like words over us, or they see potential in us. And sometimes it's like we don't believe them for what they're saying, but if you can form relationships with, I think, Lance, you and I are like so aligned on valuing relationships. It's a core value that we share. And so when someone speaks that into you, you can start to take on an identity of, I am an author, because
Yeah.
how many things that you've done in your life. And what I think was really cool here is for anybody who's listening to the podcast, Own Your Brand, expanding your brand. We all have a book within us, like there's a saying that like the people who are actually book coaches, they say each one of us has a book within us. So I just want you to think
Hmm.
about that for a second with what Lance is sharing on his journey. Ask yourself, if you don't identify as an author, maybe we can just say, I don't identify as an author yet.
Yeah.
And maybe think through the 1 to 3 topics that you would actually write on. Cause I just went through this again with Taylor too. And it was a fight. But I think he won because here I am writing this book that I didn't think I could
Mm.
write because I didn't think I was an author. But I
Yeah.
realized I was an author. It was just in a different way. You were an author in a different way. How many times have you spoke? How many times
Oh,
have you
yeah.
written emails? How many times have you
Yeah.
written memos? I've received some of those from you. So back on the topic though of the intentional legacy, there is that I think that when you find your zone of genius, when you find what you were put on this planet to, and you mentioned like God had set up all these things for you to be able to do this in time. When I consumed your book, it just was smooth like butter. Like I was like, oh my God, how that's why I asked you again, even though I know this is your first book. I intellectually know it's your first book. It does not read like your first book. So where
Thank you.
did you come up with the concept of intentional legacy? And then just give our listeners an overview of what does that mean?
Mm. Well, unlike you on the book reading pace, I have always been a big reader,
Hmm.
and I had heard early on in my career that leaders were readers.
Hmm.
Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. And so I set out for having a task of reading 50 books a year minimum.
Hmm.
And this was
Wow.
probably like 30 years ago. And I am such a competitive person. All right, from the Enneagram, Taylor is definitely an 8. My wife insists I used to be an 8. Now I've mellowed that out. I'm more in the 3 category. So I was all about completing that task. So I was reading 50 plus books a year, and I did it for years and years and years. I wasn't incredibly diligent on applying the information from those books. Now,
Mm.
fortunately, the way that you consume information, because you end up falling into certain lanes or genres, it's like I read a lot of leadership books, marriage books, father parenting books. And when you get a repetition of message, it begins to stick. So fortunately, I have a really good memory, and a lot of those books will come out. There will be something, for example, that you might say that will remind me of a book, and I will say, "Hey, have you heard of this one?" And or I'll see one of your posts, and I will. Well, I think one of the first ones I challenged you on is I said, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" And you're like, "Oh crap, what did I do?" I remember that one.
Yes. Yeah.
But I read so many books. I feel like I picked up a style that fit me by pulling ideas from hundreds of different authors. So even though, yes, this is the first official book, to your point, I would speak to large groups, a dozen times a year when I was with corporate. And those where you had to write them out, they were 60 to 90-minute talks. Well, what is
Hmm.
that? That's the written word converted verbally. So to your point, this is the first official book, but it's definitely not the first message that I've been able to craft. So the intentional legacy, though, that I was sitting in one of my thinking times, and I was coming through all these different ideas and trying to figure out what was the title going to be. And
Mm.
to your point, the title will either make or break whether someone will even pick up the book, or if it's on Amazon, whether they look at what is this book about. And it was just one of those moments. It's like, I want to help people navigate a better future. And if I was already talking about legacy and then the word, so it just kind of merged into, oh, that sounds cool. So I put it out to a handful of people to see what was their response of it. And kudos to you. Thank you for being one of the early readers of the pre-launch version and
Absolutely.
writing a little blurb about it. So I appreciate you doing that. And
Uh-huh.
also thank you for challenging me on some of the things. It's like I had an intent on what I wanted it to come across as,
Hmm.
and you were able to challenge some of that. It's like that might have been your intent, but it sounds like it's really written to men, if you remember that conversation,
Yep.
and was able to go back and it's like, you know what? She's right. So we are able to make some modifications before it got finalized into its final draft form.
So cool. It was really cool because, like, first of all, starting from the top, though, when we're looking at the fact that you were able to reflect on your own journey and realize you've been giving talks for 60 or 90 minutes that were written out, you already were an author. You were an author, you're already a speaker. So the shoe fit. And you were also such a diligent reader that at that point in time, you had started to figure out that the word was something that meant a lot to you
Mhm.
because you gain knowledge. And even if you applied a fraction of it, that's all of us, you still appreciated the fact that a book is something that is going to allow people to learn at a mass scale. And
Right.
so to now be in this position where, you came up, it just seems like it was all like divinely placed. You're like sitting in a coffee shop, like the settings there. You come up with this bomb name that people like, the Legacy Navigator. And the concept of that makes so much sense because when I think of the word navigator, I think of, somewhere like you're out in the middle of an ocean. This is what came up for me. I'm out in the middle of the ocean. I've got a sailboat. My family's on there. We have a compass, but there's limited food. What do we do? What do we do?
Yeah.
Where are we going? How do we set ourselves up for success? And thinking of what you walked us through in the book, which is the intentional legacy, which is even just that word choice of intentional legacy, that adjective adds so much meaning, because I was like, well, wait, we're planning to leave a legacy, but what is a legacy? Is it just the money you leave behind for the kids, like to go do something with? Like, is a legacy like the Patel last name in our house, which like 1,000,000,005 people in India, our last name is Patel? Like, what is it? Our house? Is it our assets? Like, is it what the lawyer says? Like, is it in case they take our business on? Like, what is the legacy? And when we started to dive into the book, it was like teaching your kids to think how you do, your belief systems, your morality, your values. Yes, there's a piece of wealth that's there too, but how do they actually think about the wealth? So I think this is a great time to kind of break down what does an intentional legacy mean, and maybe even contrast it with what is an unintentional legacy, which is which is what most people do because they're just not aware.
Yeah. And the premise of the book really is built upon what we call the legacy table, right? And so if you recall in that really came from an idea that my wife had always said about our boys. It's like, it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter if we agree with their choices or their behaviors or their attitudes, or it doesn't matter. They're a Welch. And just the mere fact that they are our sons, they will always, always have a seat at our table.
Mm,
And she has said that for decades. And so
mm,
it's like that carries a lot of weight for us. It's like, it doesn't matter. You're welcome here. And
mm.
who you want to bring into our house, they're welcome
Ooh,
here. And I remember there
ooh.
were times when I really wasn't happy with some of their decisions. And as a dad, a strong-willed dad, I was bound and determined to quote fix them. And what I learned was the older they get, they're grown men, they don't want to be fixed. People do not want to be fixed.
Mm.
They do value relationship. And I remember again one of those thinking times that I was literally praying because I was so frustrated with some of the decisions. And I really distinctly felt in my heart that it said, no relationship, no influence. So if I wanted to have
Ooh.
influence in their life, I had to focus more on the relationship than trying to fix them. And so that's where the legacy piece is about values. It's about vision. It's about knowledge. Yes, it's about wealth. And for all those years I was in the financial services industry, we did a lot of work with high net worth families. I worked with their advisors and they crafted these creative documents to restrict access to the wealth
Mm.
because they didn't trust their kids because there was no relationship with their kids. So I got to see a lot of creative ways to restrict access to wealth, but there was something inside of me. It's like, if we focus on casting vision, values, and transferring knowledge, that fourth leg of transferring wealth will take care of itself, or at least will be significantly easier. So that's where this whole thing really started, is there's more to it than just transferring wealth.
Oh, I'm just like, I'm just having a moment here because to get to hear that again from you live is like a wave washing over again of wisdom, of knowledge, of picturing my kids, Sayoni and Jahi, who you have met and seen and hung out with,
Yeah.
and just picturing them. My kids are 6 and 8 right now, and we have a boy and a girl, and I'm picturing them as adults and thinking
Mm,
about the wealth transfer. And we've done the thing that you just said, is like we have put the restricted access on our legacy plan because we are scared to death, that I've been scared to death, my husband too, that like, listen, like my parents, my husband's parents, they came here from India with $8 in a dream. Okay,
mm,
there was no legacy. We were trying to make it work, like, and
right.
we worked, and we know how to work. We were not brought up in wealth. We did not understand that. We understood hard work, frugality, multiple jobs, and like and stretching the dollar. And so when our kids now, live in this lap of luxury, this private school, custom house, got these big rooms that are the size of a master bedroom, 15 by 15. Like, our kids like literally don't understand. So we have been scared. And I'm the primary force behind this, that like, I don't want my kids to end up on cocaine traveling to like Bali because they're 25 and we're not around, and they think that this is how they're going to enjoy the quote unquote legacy we leave. So that's the fear that a lot of people have. It's not that we don't want our kids to have the wealth. We do. I just don't want my kids to end up becoming entitled. And you see all these people on these reality shows ending up, and I've known friends who have been trust fund babies who accidentally, because there was so much wealth in their hands, they were misappropriately using it, and they took them on a terrible path of life.
Right.
And so what would you say when there's other parents who have fears like that, who may have not consumed the book yet? What is your feelings about that?
That's great. And that was probably one of the number one conversations we had with these high net worth families. How do I make sure my wealth doesn't screw up my kids? And unfortunately, I was, this was 25 years ago. I did not have the life experience and the life experiences to be able to even answer that question. I was like, let's talk to the attorney. There's ways you can restrict access. So everything was about you can't have access till you're 25 or you're till you're 30, or you have to have a college degree, or you've got to get married, or you don't get anything if you run into the law. There was so many restrictions. So there's no limit to the creativity of restricting access. But the real answer to that is time spent. And again, this is coming back to around the table. So if I'm dealing with parents with children still at home, especially the younger children, the concept of having time around a dinner table. I don't care if it's a board game, snacks, having their friends over and throwing out junk food. I know you're not into junk food, but it's like, what can you do to create time around the table? There's camaraderie that's built. There's proximity, that we talk about the proximity principle in the book as well. It's like, who do you surround yourself with? So if your children are still at home, then I would say time around the table. And I've had some pushback on that with other younger parents, which got, oh, you don't know my story. We've got multiple kids. Ooh. They're all in sports. They're in different, they all have a game on the same night, different. We lived that. With the three boys, there was more than once where they were all in T-balls, for example, or soccer, and they all had a game the exact same night in 3 different locations in the city. So we do understand it. So it's not about doing it every night, but it does boil down to time spent. And we do talk about some tactics, if you want to call them that, in the latter part. I think chapter 8. If someone asks me what's my favorite chapter, it's chapter 8. It's about building family relationships, and some of the things that we did, getting out of our own box to build relationships with them. But to answer your question, if they're older and they have adult children, because I've got some folks that are in their 60s. One gentleman he worked with me for 90 days. Brought me on just as a coach for 90 days, not for business. We went through this book in fine detail, and he's got grown children, and he is now reestablishing relationships with his grown children. They're in three different cities, and he has made such incredible strides on just rebuilding a relationship. And it comes back to, he's just building a relationship now. He's not trying to fix them. He's not trying to correct them or challenge how they live, where they live, what they're doing for a career, how they're not making any money. They're not focusing on that at all. They're just now really focusing on building a relationship.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And it's like, when I think about, there's this book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Have you read it?
I have not.
Okay. It's a great book, because I just like memento mori and that concept. And one of the I'm not going to go through all the 5, but one of the 5 regrets of dying is relationships. They wish that they had invested more into relationships. And so that felt immensely validating at this stage in my life where, I'm 42. And so I was laughing when you're like, that was a long time ago. I was like, well, my college was a long time ago too. I don't know. Call myself Bijal 4.2. And when I think about that, and I think about the people that are in my life you're always busy. If you're an ambitious person, you're a driven person, and
Yep.
you put yourself out there, you're gonna have family, you're gonna have friends, you're gonna have associates, you're gonna have team. Like there's just a constant barrage of people. And one of the things that I have challenged myself in the last year has been like, I will prioritize the right relationships forward. And so, what that looks like for me personally is that I have certain relationship spots that are just like invaluable and there's no question mark. Like my family, that's an invaluable question mark, an invaluable spot there. Then a tier up from that is to say, okay, who else in my life do I really value the relationship that I'm going to keep pouring into that? And then I have another stage of like, this is a pretty good relationship and I want to make sure we're kind of consistently keeping basis and I don't want to fall out of. And then I have a tier above that that's like, the spots kind of rotate and it's like, are we in the same
Yeah.
juncture of life? Have we seen each other lately? What are we navigating? What's the vibrational energy feel like? And it's kind of more rotational. And I love that you are hitting on a topic that the dying is thinking about is like, what was my relationship like? Because your closest relationship you're going to care about is with your partner, if you still had one, and your kids. Like that is going to be, or and then potentially your parents. So like right from that family tree. And
Yeah.
I think it's amazing to have watched you. So this is a totally different interview because I'm not like, oh, Lance, tell me about your book. I'm like, Lance, let's talk about your book because I see your relationship with Taylor. I see your relationship with Peyton. I see your relationship with your wife, Allie. Like, I've witnessed it. I see it. You know, Taylor talks about it to me. He's like, I can't wait till he's like, isn't it be so cool when your kids are grown and you get to experience this relationship? And I don't know why he said that to me as if he's like older. I was like, I don't know where I was like, dude, you're like not older than me, but it was just out of nowhere. He's like, I can't wait for you to experience that, like what it looks like. And I was just for a second being like, my kids are gonna grow up. There's gonna be a time there. So to have witnessed you living the thing you wrote about, it's amazing. And to know everyone, chapter 8 of the Legacy Navigator is where you can find that. And it's going to be, even if people don't read the full book, right? Like there's a lot of people who have intentions on reading books. Just skip to chapter 8 then and get there because you'll never regret that moment. And so you have
Let me
3 kids,
let me
3
tell you a quick
boys.
let me
Yeah,
tell you
tell
a
me a
quick
story.
story
Tell me a
about
story.
Taylor. Before he had Kate, before he had kids, he was adamant that when they're 18, they're out of the house. They're on their own. He's not going to be supporting them. To hear his story now,
Oh my gosh.
right? Once you have children, it definitely changes your perspective and your paradigm. So it's like, it is wonderful to be able to just get those random calls, But anyway, that was just a side note. He
I
has
love
definitely
that.
changed once he had his first daughter.
Oh my gosh. It's totally, it's just like you will adapt one way or another. And I think
Yeah,
it's cool to see that, like, watching people grow into the next better version of their better higher self. So, what I was
I
going to
love
say
that.
is that, like, to see this relationship and to have your 3 sons be in the same city, like to be in Nashville, how the heck did that happen?
We
Two,
chased them.
what did Allie do to make this happen? Did she manifest this? And number 3 is like, that is an amazing situation in so many ways. And we actually mirror each other, by the way. My brother and my parents are also in Houston. And we don't know how this happened. Like, our family was not the kind that was going to act codependent and say, we're going to go like live in the same city. And we're not codependent. But the fact that this just happened by accident is insane to our family. I'm kind of curious the story of how did that happen?
Oh my goodness. Do you know the story? Were you just setting this up? Because it's
I
hilarious.
I I well I do vaguely know the story. Come on,
So,
man, I'm relational, but like our audience does not know the story, Lance. So
well,
that's why I'm
this
asking
is
you.
more. So, our daughter-in-law, Lindsay, does hair, and she has done my wife's hair before Taylor and Lindsay were ever even dating. So we knew her when we lived in Missouri. At the time we lived in Memphis, and Taylor and Lindsay lived here, and so Allison would drive up every 4 to 6 weeks to get her hair done. One day she got home and she said, "How long would it take to sell the house?" And I'm like, we just got here. We had just built our forever, we thought was our forever home. It was our dream house. It was everything we wanted. And I'm like, what happened? She goes, well, Lindsay was showing me where they're going to build a house, and they chose this because that's where their kids are going to go to school. I'm like, are they pregnant? She goes, no, not yet, but I don't want to be 3 hours away. And I'm like,
Oh,
well, okay. So fast forward, we end up selling the house. We told them we were going to be moving here, and Taylor was not excited. He had actually set us down to let us know, when you move here, I just want you to know we're not going to be available all the time. We can't be having the Sunday lunches. We have our friends, we have our life, and something inside of Allison, Allie, she says, we're going to have our own friends. We're going to have our own party, and you're going to have to get on my schedule to get us fit in. I mean, she just came right back at him, and when we got here, it was a concern when we moved here to Nashville, because we had a lot of really good friends from our church in Memphis, but we built such amazing friendships, deep friendships. We have a group we call ourselves the Dinner Club. It's two other couples. We're all empty nesters. All six of us can flat out cook. And there are times that Taylor or Lindsay were like, hey, what are you doing? It's like, we're with our dinner club. Oh, okay. Do you want to come watch Kate? Well, I can't. We're busy, so it's been fun. But being able to have them close by has been a tremendous blessing. And I'm sure that if you were asked them now, having grandparents that close, that literally, if we're not busy, we'll drop everything and we're there.
I know
So it's
it. I
funny.
know it. So like this is the same with my parents. So like my sister-in-law lived here and she was only going to be here one more year in Houston. And then suddenly that next month, my husband Cecil, who you know too, got
Yep.
a residency here. And so it was just 3-year residency and that was going to be in Houston. But my sister-in-law was like, I have 1 month to know if I'm staying in Houston another year or not. My brother was in Chicago and the next month, she's like, I am staying in Houston. Your brother's moving to Houston a month after I did. And so I'm like, okay. And then Cecil moves the same month. So suddenly my sister in law is randomly in Houston. And then the three of us all end up in Houston on accident. I did not like Houston at all. This was not where I wanted to be. This was not a glamorous city for a commercial award winning interior designer. I was like, I'll truck it out.
Yeah.
And after a couple years, we all were like, we're not staying here. A couple years later, we're all still here. And then we called my parents over before we had kids. And we said, you guys should come here where it happened to be in the same city. They're like, well, what if you guys move? Or we're like, well, all bets off. We're not promising you anything, but you should come move here. They move here. And my brother has a daughter, and then we have a daughter 4 months later. And I can't even tell you, I
Mm.
know what they mean. We can't imagine if my parents weren't here, we would not be living the life we did. And so it's incredible how that happened. But the part I don't know, how did Peyton and Logan end up there too? How did you get the whole crew assembled?
Well, Peyton decided he wanted to work for Taylor, so that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other story, because Taylor didn't want to hire him. But Peyton just kind of is like, I'm going to Nashville and I'm going to work for you. And so, that's just another long story. Peyton is an amazing, gifted young man in sales, but he became a student of it. He is also a reader. He was also very coachable. And, that's part of the thing that's in the book as far as the intentional side of just investing. Because I used to tell the guys, if you want to make a good living, you either have to be in sales or you have to own your own business.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was just so many little life lessons that, when they were working at Starbucks or a fast food place and we would have our talks, it's like, this is, and nothing against this. So that's the disclaimer. It's like, this is why you don't want an hourly wage job.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to work your tail off. You're going to be the low man on the totem pole. You're just going to, it's not a way to really thrive. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's life lessons that will pop up out of all of those things, but they just all ended up here. We love the city. There's a lot here. I came here because I was still corporate at the time. So the airport
Mm-hmm.
here was much, much better. but no, it's just a blessing for sure to have everyone here.
And so that's what I'm saying. Like it's so normal of a story that people end up like going back to where they grew up, but it's not normal for an entire family and all the kids to transplant together. So I think that
Yeah.
again, back to the intentional legacy and all the fringe benefits that come from that. It reminds me of something that Kate said, Taylor's daughter, that I just think is so cute. I just can't get over it, that the Welches are helpers.
Uh,
Do you remember when she said that the Welches are
yeah.
helpers? I was
Yeah.
like, I love you guys even more. But
Yeah.
when we're thinking about how much our kids pick up from the time that we spend with them and the relationship that we're building when we're instilling values, it's like that legacy table concept of like, she's 5 and she thinks
Yeah.
that to be true about what her identity is. That's when we tie it back to like a legacy brand. It's like, so back in the day, like, in medieval times, and if you were a family of royalty or nobility, you had like a family banner. And
Right.
so
The
there's a
crest.
lot to be said about your surname. Okay, Patels are a very proud bunch. Lance, I don't know how much you know about Indians, but like, we don't play. So when you're like, oh, I'm not trying to offend anybody on hourly wages, I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, the Indians who came here from America, they all own motels. So there's a hotel, motel, Patel thing. 55% of the hotel industry in America is owned by Indians, and the majority are Patels. So my parents
Wow.
owned a motel, my husband's parents owned motels. And so we're not here to, Patels are known as the business people of India. And so it's just, that's the way that it works. Like we just aspire for big things. And so when you think about a legacy brand as it relates to a family name, what do you
Mm.
attribute to your family name, the Welch name, and what you were planning to install? And then what
Mm.
would you say to our listeners on how can they really establish their family legacy and their family name?
That's great. Before I hit that, I'm going to share with you the latest Kate-ism that
Okay.
she came out with. She doesn't say her L's real well yet,
Oh.
but she informed her mom the other day, Mom, we don't live in whack. They don't live in lack. We don't live in whack. So that's kind of been our little phrase lately is we don't live in
Oh,
whack.
we don't
We have
live in whack. We
we have
don't.
abundance, not live in
Yes.
whack.
Look at
Isn't that
her
awesome?
go. Ready.
Right?
Mindset
But
coaching by Kate.
it is, but it's like it's the things that the things that are picked up, right? We talk in the book, it's more easily caught than taught, but the
Mm-hmm.
real power is when the caught and the taught are aligned. And
Mm.
we're getting to see that with the things that Taylor and Lindsay are doing intentionally. They're walking their talk and they're doing it intentionally, and that is what's really fun. And so some of the things too that we look back and it's like, here's some of the things we did as parents, and someone asked, what would you do different? And Taylor and I've had some of these conversations, and when the others have kids, we'll have that too. But uh, I think I even mentioned it in the book that at the end of each year, I used to write a letter to all the boys, and
Mm.
it would go into the folder, and it was I hope they don't see this folder, right? It's the letter that if something happened to me, because I traveled corporately a ton, I wanted to make sure that they knew what Dad stood for, what was my values, what was my mission,
Mm.
what was my faith. What I wanted them to just know, right? It's entirely up to them to make their own choices, but I wanted them to know what I stood for. So that was, I hope they don't see this folder. But at the end of each year,
Wow.
I'd write a new letter and I'd pitch the old one. Hindsight, this is where I've challenged Taylor. It's like, save all those letters at
Oh.
when she's 18 or when she's getting married, whatever. Unload all of this is what I
Mm.
wrote to you every year. And so
Oh,
that's
that's
something that
beautiful.
he's instilling and making an improvement on something that we did. And as a parent, I know you agree with this. I want my children to have opportunity to do head and shoulders above anything I've ever done. Now
100%.
that's not to I was sharing that with the guy from our church, and he said, well, be careful with that. And I thought this was really good wisdom. I used to say, I want my ceiling to be my son's floor. And he said, be careful with that because I do not need a ceiling in my own life. It's okay to want them to do exceedingly above and beyond what I've done, but I don't have to have a ceiling for that to happen.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
there's, you and I, we've talked about the importance of words and the framework and the vibrational frequencies. And that was one of those things that, unbeknownst to me, I was putting a ceiling in my life. And so, to your point, proximity
Oof.
principle, do we have people in our life that are challenging us on our words so that we don't inadvertently or subconsciously make a statement that puts a limiting factor into us?
I love
That makes,
that's
right.
yeah, that's so good. And we're gonna tie back to the name thing, but it reminds me of that
Yeah.
conversation that they didn't hear. And I use this all the time, but that time that you called me out on a post and you texted me, and we did not have this relationship then. So I was
No.
literally
No.
mortified of like, why are you I'm like can you talk? And I'm like about what? I'm like, okay. And I called you. And that's when you taught me about dropping the word trying. You're like, I had said something like, I'm trying to do this. And you were like, hey, listen, you're not trying to do anything. You are either doing it or you are not doing it. But the word trying is you lying to yourself on what your actual effort or commitment looks like. Got it? And I was like, got it. And it was like 3 minutes. And I was like, just got off the phone. And I was like, wow, okay. Damn, and it's just like it took me a while to process that because it took me off guard, but that was the start of our challenging
Yeah.
relationship where there's a lot of love there's a lot of support, but it's also like I have really come to value people who challenge me in my life because I'm definitely going to want the love too. That's got to be there. But if someone doesn't challenge you, I just don't even really think they love you. I think you have a BS relationship with them. I'm like,
I
you
agree.
are here for some vanity metric that I am not interested in. And so I've taken that over and over and over again and applied it. And so to our listeners, it seems so innocent to just be like, yeah, I'm trying to lose weight. Oh, I'm trying to grow the business. Oh, I'm trying to be present with my kids. Like, no. Stop.
Or I
Stop. The
need.
T word is the bad word. Like,
Yeah.
drop it. I am doing this. I am working towards this. I am committed to this. What were you going to say?
No, I was just agreeing. The other word was I need. I need to complete
Mm,
75 hard,
uh-huh.
or I need to lose. It's the same thing. Need is
Yes.
and try. They're just weak words, and
Weak
they have no
words.
power, no commitment, no authority. So yeah, kudos to
I
you on
love
that.
that. I love that. So let's take it back. Let's take it back to the
Yeah,
family name. So, like, what did you
yeah,
want the family name of Welch to represent?
yeah. I love that, and that's something that we do talk about on an annual basis. We do that
Mm,
family vision cast at the end of each year, and that's definitely for your listeners to get the book. There are some access resources in the back of the book that's just, I think they're gold. The family resource guide, the
hmm.
first Friday discussion guide, which you guys do now.
Yeah.
It's just a resource that gets you on track. So intentionality and consistency, that's what I want part of my legacy to be. Is I might not have been right all the time, right? Allie is the one that's right all the time. She'll tell you that. I will be intentional. I will
Mm,
be consistent. And when I'm wrong, when I find a better way, I will apologize, I'll repent, I will make things right, and I'm not going to be married to a concept that no longer works. So
mm, hmm.
intentionality and consistency are two of the bigger things. Obviously for us, our faith is going to be a big thing.
Hmm.
Integrity. So it's like I want to be known as a dad that was highly intentional to build strong relationships and was always going to be pursuing my kids. And I think there's a misnomer that young men don't want to necessarily be pursued by their dad. But the
Ooh.
experience I'm seeing is
Ooh.
my sons have always appreciated and valued me pursuing them. And I, as a dad, I also have to understand they are living very busy lives. I cannot wear my feelings on my shirt sleeves if I don't get a text back in a day. Now, I will give him a hard time, and you know who I'm talking about. But if I don't get a text back very quickly, I don't get offended.
Hmm.
I know our relationship is strong enough that when we do get to catch up, we're going to be good. When I was thinking about the title of this, Own Your Brand, the thing that comes to my mind in that was in the book was the Max Jukes family and the Jonathan and Sarah Edwards family. And if we think about what kind of brand do those two names represent, And you look at that, and the Max Jukes family, that was a legacy. It's a brand. It's not a brand that is going to be well thought of, right? When you dig into and look at what kind of legacy did Max Jukes leave? And they did that study. It was a 150-year study that there was the verbiage of the report that came out is there was not one positive trait that came out of the Jukes lineage.
Oof.
Now, is that the brand you want for your family name? I think not.
Mm.
Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, they did the same 150-year study, and it is line upon line upon line of contributions, positive contributions to society, everything from politics to education to um, public service to philanthropic. That's the type of legacy you want. And then when you look at the difference between those two men and how they interacted with their family, Max Jukes had no interaction. They
Oh.
can't. They don't even know how many wives that he had or how many women fathered all those children or mothered all those children. They don't know. He was just a loose cannon. Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, they were highly intentional. They have 11 kids, and he spent time with them every day. We talk about being intentional will often be inconvenient,
Mm.
but if you ignore it, the end result will be very inconvenient as well. So Bijal, you're going to be inconvenienced on either side of that coin.
Mm.
One has a positive outcome, one has a negative outcome. So you do get to choose your inconvenience. It's just a
Mm.
matter of when does it show up.
You get to choose your inconvenience. That's awesome. Well, I think I have to ask you this question. That was a beautiful sum up of two examples from the book. When I think about legacy and I think about family brands and legacy brands, I mean the Vanderbilts versus the Rockefellers. Like,
Mm.
tell us, like, in a minute or two, what is your synopsis of, like, first of all, give a quick history lesson for those who may not know what happened to the Vanderbilts compared to the Roosevelts, and then Rockefellers, and then tell us where did they go wrong? I want to know where they went
Mm.
wrong.
The real short version is Cornelius Vanderbilt was one of the wealthiest individuals in the world in the late 1800s. They donated $1 million to the University of Vanderbilt, and you think about $1 million trust fund back in the 1800s.
Oof.
If it wasn't for that money that was set aside in a trust or an endowment for the university, that money wouldn't have made it either. But there's a concept called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And the short version of that is if you don't instill values into the next generation, you don't teach them how to manage and create wealth, they begin to spin through it in that second generation, which means now they don't have even the ability to help train the third generation on what to do with money, which means that third generation, they usually die penniless. And that is
Mm.
something that did happen, which means the next generation, they got to roll their shirt sleeves up and get back to work again. So the Vanderbilts, they had to do that. They did rebuild, and so many families don't. So kudos to that. They did rebuild. The Rockefellers, totally different story. The DuPonts, the Morgans, I mean, there's a lot of family wealth and family names. The biggest difference was they were highly intentional in training up that next generation
Mm.
to be able to take over the family business. And I do give an example that kind of the precursor of this whole book was when I got to I won a trip to Providence, Rhode Island. And the house that we had dinner at that night was like a 44,000 square foot home that
Wow.
had been in the family's, the home had been in the family for 4 generations. And they only used the house like 4 or 5 weeks a year. But during that 4 or 5 weeks, they brought the heads of all their companies that they owned to the house for their family vision, for their business planning events. But the owners or the heads of all those companies were family members. And so they had the matriarch, patriarch that was overseeing everything, but their children were in charge of companies. And so by the time the patriarch, matriarch passed away, their children had had decades learning on the job of what to do with their businesses. They
Mm.
were highly intentional. And so that's really what the premise is when you're intentional, even if you're not always right, the intentionality side of things will keep putting you back on the right track, because you're going to recognize when things are going off track, and it gives you an opportunity to course correct. But if you have no intentionality of that, you don't even recognize that you're off track.
No, so good. That's such a great, I mean, that's just like gems upon gems right there too, to be like in 3 generations, most family lose any of the wealth that they'd actually built. But here's the antidote to that is to be intentional. And there's so many more resources within the book, so many applicable frameworks that are not speaking at like a collegiate level that you've got to like set aside working days to get done. It walks you through what you can do. There's more resources to learn about First Friday, which is like a monthly intention setting activity with your partner and where are you going with your life. And I wonder how many people miss the opportunity to have the once a month dialogue with their partner to get real, what's working, what could get better. So all of that is in the book. It's amazing. Cecil and I have practiced it. It first created some controversy because we are two strong-willed entrepreneurs. I like that you said patriarch and matriarch because that is how we're running this household. And then we had to get through it because we realized we're on the same team. So it was an avenue to bring us closer together. So where can people find we'll have everything linked in, but where's the best place for people to get the book?
Right now it's on Amazon, and you got the hard copy, paper book, e-Kindle. It's on Audible as well.
Yes, I saw that. And and it's your voice.
It is my voice. It is.
I love that.
And the Audible version, it does still give the PDF for all the stuff that's in the appendix of this. So even if you go the Audible route, you still have access to the resources.
Okay, amazing. So we've covered things that are really, really high level. I'll do some rapid fire questions for you because I like those in podcasts. Okay.
All right.
So what is the number one thing that people are going to get from reading the book that they wouldn't have got if they just listened to this podcast, which is full of gold? But what is the one benefit they're going to get from taking that one next step to actually get the book?
I can tell you what my hope is, that they feel encouraged and equipped, because I think a lot of people will fail to be intentional about their legacy because they think it's so big. There's so many options that they begin to feel overwhelmed. And we know that when any person feels overwhelmed, the natural reaction is to do nothing. So my hope with this book is they actually feel encouraged, equipped, and resourced to even take that very first step.
I love that. Okay. All right. Number 2, what makes you an amazing coach?
I care.
I feel that. I feel that. Care. I see that. You send me stuff sometimes that you send your coaching clients, and I think it's just so beautiful, well written, just love. And you just have a sense of it to be like, let me just share what this is and let me be open-handed and abundant about that. All right. Number 3, who's more important, the patriarch or the matriarch?
Matriarch for sure.
Okay, good. Number 4, absolutely. Who's your favorite son?
Oh, I can't go there. I know Peyton put you up to that. It's funny.
Peyton's my favorite. Taylor's just confused on the matter. No,
I'll make some type of social media post, and he's always over there. No. Your favorite son. I mean, it's just.
It's no, you don't have to answer that. I'm just playing around. It's when I saw Allie and Peyton have their mother-son dance. That's all we needed to know. So,
man.
Number 5, if you had to pick your number 1 core value of the Welch family, of this beautiful family that the Patels literally think of the Welches as family, because our core values are so overlapped and so aligned. And I love all the members of your family that I've interacted with and have individual relationships with all of them. Like mine and your relationship is completely different than I actually didn't even tell Taylor we had a relationship for a while because I just didn't want it. I didn't want him to get I didn't want it to get in the way or him to think it had anything to do with him. What is your number 1 core value that you really stand behind?
Integrity. Integrity. And my word is my bond. If I tell you something, I will do everything I can to fulfill it. And if I can't, I'm going to be on the phone or on the email to let you know what's going on. But for me, integrity.
I had a feel like that word was coming through my mouth, like, because you've a lot of strong values, and I feel them, and I sense them, and I could say them. I could reverse engineer what they are, but we don't have to do that because we share most of them. And I just have to tell you this is like the family that you have raised, that you've put together. That was the entire reason that I was like, hey, me and Sita want to have dinner with you and Allie, because you guys are ahead of us, and you're such an amazing role model as parents who have grown children who are now grandparents, but who could teach and inspire us in ways that we didn't have that model. Like both of our parents, they're amazing and they have great value systems, but they were both in arranged marriage. And that's what our Indian culture had at that time. And so to see what you guys have built together as a family, to know the members of your family from oldest to youngest, and to see it play out is such a beautiful thing that I am so grateful that we have this relationship and that I have a chance to get to learn from somebody who's ahead of me, who's very abundant with their wisdom and very giving and generous with all the things that you've learned. So I just have to stop and say, it means a lot. It carries a lot of weight. And so I just can't wait until the second book comes out.
Thank you. And we don't
All
whiv
right,
and whack.
We don't whiv and whack. So we have a second book, Lance. All right.
That's right.
Love you. Literally,
Love you.
I love Allie. She's so fun. I love her sense of humor. And so I'm excited, guys. Check out the Legacy Navigator. You want to build a family like the Welches. They are who they say they are. And I've seen them all express the challenging but the loving side of their character. Freaking amazing. And this is something you can borrow and you can build for your family. And it doesn't have to do with wealth. It doesn't have to do with being somebody who's got this entire estate you're leaving behind. When you feel like you have the imprint of what you stood for in your children and they call you when they're adults, you're going to absolutely love that. So thanks again, Lance, for coming, giving your time, bestowing your energy, your wisdom, your just generosity, and just an overall kick-ass person. And so thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Love it.
Okay. Link in the comments, guys. Go get that book. I read it. It's a beautiful read. I endorsed it, but I also am double endorsing it because it is that good.